Okay. Hello, everybody. I am Reed Coverdale, the naturalist capitalist, and today I am with Mike. And hey, how you doing, Mike?
Hey, Reed, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Glad you're here. So, Mike and I have both been politically active lately. Mike for longer than I have. I got involved in Tulsi Gabbard's campaign about 6 months ago because I kind of saw the lineup of candidates and what was happening, and I just was not happy with the way things were going. So I figured if I want to make a change, I need to get involved now. And so I did, and no change happened anyway. and Things are kind of a mess right now. So instead of just voting or just trying to get someone to vote for a particular person, I've kind of changed my method into being a messenger for a certain set of ideas. So I figure the best way I can do that is starting a channel and bringing people on who agree with me and disagree with me and trying to get those ideas out there and try to get people to think, and maybe they'll end up thinking the same way I do, maybe not, but right now they don't, people just don't think. They just go along with whatever they're taught to think. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? I know you were involved a little bit with Ron Paul's campaign. Just give us a little information about who you are, what you do, and what you're concerned about nowadays.
Yeah. Well, my name's Mike. I've been actively political probably since 2007. I got involved with the Ron Paul campaign, mostly just the grassroots side of things. I never really, I've met Ron Paul on a couple occasions. The day he announced that he was running in 2012, I was there in New Hampshire, and I got a chance to meet with him, have a chat. I live in Central New York, which is upstate. Not New York City or anything. I have been very disgruntled for several years because most of the candidates I choose to support never seem to make their way into office. So, I jump and bounce around between hopefully optimistic that my candidate might actually make a big enough splash to gain some support, to being extremely cynical and annoyed with the world around me, the fact that I can't seem to get anybody I know involved in this kind of school of thought. So, and I also was a very large supporter of Tulsi Gabbard. And, you and I kind of met along because of that connection. And, I was able to draw the line from Ron Paul to Rand Paul right to Tulsi Gabbard. And you, as I saw, made a video about that. So we started talking because I started a page called Ron Paul Supporters for Tulsi Gabbard. And, one thing led to another. And now I'm just sitting here wondering what candidate I'm going to be voting for in November. Primary in New York State pretty much been given to Joe Biden. I don't know if we're even going to have it, and, I switched to Democrat Party solely for the purpose of voting for Tulsi Gabbard, and now that's off the table, so I don't know what I'm going to be doing, I'm probably going to be back to the Libertarian Party, which is what I was before. Prior to that, I was pretty much a Republican, mostly because of Congressman Thomas Massey, Justin Amash, and Senator Rand Paul, because those are the guys who I am firmly supporting. And, everyone else just seems to leave me wanting, how hard is it to find an anti-war candidate these days? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, so you kind of touched on it there. We both had the exact same political path over the last 8 years. In high school, I got interested in Ron Paul, and then I kind of started moving away from the traditional Republican view, and then in 2016, I got way into Rand Paul, and that was the most involved I had been. I wasn't working on his campaign or anything, but I was actively advocating those ideas. And then when Donald Trump came in, I was just like, okay, I can't have anything to do with this movement anymore. So I was kind of lost. I kind of rejected the Republican Party, but then it was Hillary Clinton who was the Democrats. And so then that's when I kind of got into Gary Johnson. And I wasn't a solid libertarian necessarily, but he just was the only one who represented anything that I valued. And then this year or last year, I was thinking, I'm not even going to vote for president anymore. And then I found out about Tulsi Gabbard, and like you, we didn't agree with her on everything, but there was a huge overlap. The number one thing being war, but a lot of people acted like that was the only crossover. But she wanted to audit the Federal Reserve. She wanted to balance the budget. She wanted to overturn the Patriot Act. She wanted to do, I'd say like 2/3 of her platform was pretty much in line with libertarianism. And then the other things we could kind of get over. So what I thought was interesting was realizing that we have a lot more in common with progressives than I ever thought. I hadn't really ever considered that before, but there were people from both sides of the camp joining her campaign. And I found that even in economics, there's some things that we hate in common. Like we hate corporatism, we hate Wall Street having all the power it does. We hate the banks getting away with massive bailouts while we get screwed over. So unfortunately, right now that the president, their main candidate, who is Bernie Sanders, instead of trying to form a coalition like they convinced us they were going to try to do, they've kind of just doubled down on their like strict ideology, and they're saying like we need to start a workers' party or like a communist party, or and there are some of them who are willing to talk with us, but most of them are really strict. And so what I'm trying to do is bring to some of them and tell them, look, we hate the same thing you do. So let's talk and let's try to get some answers filtered out. But it seems really hard. So I know some of the stuff you've sent me, you've seen that too, that the progressives, they seemed like they wanted to work with us when they had a candidate, but now that their candidate's gone, they kind of like don't, it's like they,
right. Yeah.
It's like they don't really consider us anymore. So
well, I think I was watching a clip of Crystal Ball on the Hill, the internet TV show, and she had a comment about, well, Justin Amash is running for president, but I won't be voting for him. And I'm like, wow, I thought there was some crossover going on here with all the love for Tulsi Gabbard, because I kind of felt, I mean, I was watching that show pretty closely for a while because there's, Jimmy Dore, Kim Iverson, Crystal Ball, people were all supporting Tulsi. So I've been following them, to try to get the scoop on why people think she could be a worthy candidate. And now, and then she said something like that, and I'm like, wait a minute, that, it just kind of struck me as odd that, I feel like I'm on the same page with these people for some ideas, but some of them I just recoil and say, I don't know if Medicare for all is going to solve all our problems with regards to healthcare. I think a free market solution, might be a better idea if we could take out some government red tape instead of, the system we have right now, which is 80% run by the government and the insurance companies anyway. I understand the insurance companies are bad, but, I don't know a better way to do it right now.
So what I wanted to ask you is, do you think progressives have an unfair view or a skewed view of libertarians? Do you think that they view them as pro-corporatist or pro, Jeff Bezos, that they just love billionaires and they hate the middle class and they hate the environment and they hate poor people and they just want us to be an anarchist society that's completely run by the rich. Do you think that's kind of what they think of us and that that's not really fair?
I think that is exactly what they think. I have a couple friends who I would consider progressives, and they sort of tend to, I have one who I will share an idea that Tulsi Gabbard talked about, and she'll be all on board with it. And then I'll have Ron share a post from Rand, and she'll be like, boy, I don't know that. I don't trust that guy. And I'm like, boy, if we understood the lines that were drawn to create these corporations and the power that they have over this country comes from their cozy relationship with the government. The government is the culprit in this. It seems logical to me, but I have a hard time explaining it to them because they just keep on seeing the government as the solution rather than the source of the problem.
With private prisons and the criminal justice problems we have, I try to tell them, like, look, private prisons are less than 10% of all prisons. So if you think just getting rid of private prisons is going to fix our criminal justice problem, that it's not the laws and the politicians and, all the horrible corruption within the government, well, I don't even know what to tell you. They just want to, they think if you just take incentive and profit out of a system, that it'll completely solve all the problems, where I think you and I would agree the problem is when you mix profit and government together, because then the government uses that as a vehicle to pay off, to pay off all the lobbyists and all the corporations that have links with them, and that you really have to just separate them, and you have to make laws that keep them separate so they can't scratch each other's backs.
Yeah, and I seem to remember Tulsi talking about some of those ideas when she was running. Kudos to her for at least seeing, I think she's sharper than some people let on, but what can we do? We can't, I have a feeling if she tried to take it all the way to the convention, that they would have railroaded her right out of the party, At the same time, I don't know what she's planning to do after she's done with her role in Congress. So, who knows what's going to happen,
Yeah. So, how do you feel about that? How she's reacted so far? Are you kind of ambivalent, or are you pissed, or are you like, well, she didn't really have a choice? When Rand Paul endorsed Donald Trump in 2016, I was pretty upset at first, but nothing about Rand Paul really changed. His voting records stayed the same. His Senate speeches stayed the same. The man was obviously the same regardless of who he endorsed. To me, after Tulsi endorsed Biden, something actually changed about the way she started acting. She, the corporate bailouts that she's been voting for. I watched her interview with Jimmy Dore, and she was saying things about foreign policy in that interview that I never thought she would say, because she was always talking about how our missions nowadays are not worthy of our soldiers' sacrifice, but then suddenly she was saying they were in that video. So are you at all upset about how that turned out, or what do you think?
I'm upset that she felt the need to I have a feeling like, they put the pressure on her and said, if you don't endorse Biden, your career's over. I mean, they probably said the same thing about her when she decided to take her own step down from the DNC, like she did, and endorse Bernie Sanders back in 2016. But, I don't know. Maybe they got to her. Maybe she running an honest campaign as she possibly could, and then she succumbed to the pressure because everyone was telling her, you're not gaining the support you need to call yourself, to keep telling people when I'm president. So at some point, it starts to become disingenuous when you're telling all these people, okay, well, when we get to the convention, we're going to do X, Y, and Z. And if you can't get any delegates to go there, you kind of have to drop out and, ask yourself, well, what was I thinking that whole time? I actually like the message she had, and I wish she could have held her ground the same way Ron Paul did, but she's been in Congress for 6 years. Ron Paul had been in there for more than 30, as I recall, when he ran in 2000. So, he had his appointments in the party. He had a comfortable position. Every so often they would try to run candidates against him and in the primary, and he would defeat them easily. So, it's not the same thing. So
Right.
it is what same thing with Rand endorsing Donald Trump. If he had decided to endorse, the Libertarian candidate and Donald Trump won, he would not have the same access he did to him as a president.
Right. One other thing that's kind of annoying to me is that people get so hung up on a person that they can't even see that message is also presented by other people. So a lot of people who got involved in politics for the first time because of Tulsi, I tried telling them, like, look, there are other people in Congress who say this. I talked about Thomas Massey and Rand Paul and Justin Amash and Ron Paul and Dennis Kucinich. I was trying to tell them, like, look, there are other people who push these same policies, but it seems like a lot of people who were on that campaign just kind of, once she disappeared, they disappeared, and they're just hoping she runs again in 4 years. And what I'm trying to do is get all these people together and realize that we have things in common that we can work on. And instead of just getting stuck on a person, we need to create a movement that's going to actually make change. But I'm kind of discouraged because I think people care more about personality than policy. I think that's why Donald Trump was popular. I don't think his policies were really anything that would help too many people in the middle class, but they just liked him because he was tough and he'd yell at the people they don't like. How do we like break through and get people to care about issues again instead of just how someone acts?
Donald Trump is very good at selling an idea regardless of whether or not it's true, because it's not just a steak. If Donald Trump puts his name on it, it's the best steak ever. For up until this COVID-19 fiasco where they decided to shut down the economy and everything is all falling apart, he was still saying this is the greatest economy in the history of the world, regardless of whether or not that's what the numbers say, because the numbers were tepid at best. If anything, his economy numbers were a continuation of Obama, but it doesn't matter. He's still beating the drum like this is the best economy in the history of the world. If we hadn't hit this COVID-19 thing, we were going to fall apart, But the key is that most of the people out there don't seem to understand that, They're plugged in and they realize, boy, there's a lot of problems out here.
Right. Yeah. So if you had told someone that was a big Donald Trump supporter a few years ago that he was going to push for a bunch of corporate bailouts, really similar to what Obama had done in 2008 and 9, don't you think a lot of his supporters would have been in denial of that? Like, no, there's no way he'd do that. He's fighting for the common man. He's not for the big Wall Street bankers. He cares about us. And then even when those things actually happen, they just completely turn their eyes away from it and act like it's not happening. And I don't even know how you reason with someone who won't accept reality when it's happening right in front of them.
Well, I'll be honest. In 2016, I voted for Donald Trump. I live in New York State, so it's not like it made any difference. The state still went to Hillary Clinton, but I was not very impressed with Gary Johnson's performance, honestly. But getting back to Donald Trump, I chose to move away from supporting him this time because of the trade war with China. I thought it was very poorly played out, and the way I've been following it, I think he was using it as a tool to tweak the market. And every time the market would start to tumble down, we'd send a rumor out about a potential trade deal with China, and we're possibly making a motion on that, and then suddenly there would be a boost in the market because people like rumors. And if we could just get to phase 2 or phase 1, or the story was a constantly moving narrative that you could never actually achieve. And he's very good at that kind of thing, but let's be honest, the future of this country is based on his whims and whether or not he's steering us in a positive direction. I stop and think about what life would be like if back in 2008 Ron Paul had actually won, and boy, things would probably be very different today.
Yeah, that's an understatement. So the reason I didn't vote for Donald Trump, aside from policy, was that when he was running in 2016, he blamed all the problems on something disposable. So he blamed a lot of economic problems we have on immigrants,
right?
Which to me was like totally wrong. So that was my first big aversion to him. And I think he's really just continued that trajectory as president. Everything is somebody else's fault. And he's actually changed whose fault it is from when he was running for president to when he became president, because kind of like you said with Obama's economy, he criticized it when he was a candidate. He criticized Obama's policy with Iran before he was a candidate. He kind of criticized like all these things. And then as soon as he became president, suddenly those things were okay. And then it was everything that was bad is somebody else's fault somewhere. It's the Democrats or the Never Trump Republicans or the Chinese and so it's at the point where if anyone's really paying attention, they're not going to listen to anything he says when he blames a problem on someone. But the problem is the Democrats aren't any better. They do the same thing. They blame all the problems on the rich, or they just choose scapegoats too. I feel like libertarians really try to get to the core of what's wrong with a system. Instead of trying to blame it on a certain group of people, they'll say, no, like it's not because of such and such politician, it's because of the Federal Reserve or our monetary policy. That's why you're screwed. The terrorists are attacking us because we've been in their countries for years. I feel like it's really the pragmatic party, and I don't think they've been proven wrong on anything for the last 20 years. Like everything that they've been saying has turned out to be true. But we still get ignored as a ridiculous party. And I think it's because on Facebook and in social media, it's just presented as a gun-loving, government-hating hillbilly group, and they don't try to present themselves as people with serious solutions. But if you actually listen to people who've been running for these positions, they really do have serious solutions. So how do we bring those solutions to common day Americans? How do we tell them, like, look, the reason you're so far in debt right now is partially your fault, but it's also because the Federal Reserve has had artificially low interest rates for years, and you're borrowing money that you shouldn't get approved for, and you're spending money that you don't have, and that's what's led you to this place where you're doing nothing but making payments and you don't own anything. So how do we try to bring those messages to people like you and me who aren't rich and who aren't just gun-loving idiots or whatever? We're trying to make it through everyday life.
Well, it's hard for me to say. I like a lot of the things Ron Paul used to say. Like, I think I remember one of the things he said was, there's the stupid party and evil party, and every now and then they get together and do something stupid and evil, and they call it bipartisan. He had a really good way at coining a phrase, and I think it's more important to be personable than it is to be right. To be out there saying something in a way people can understand it, and gaining that level of trust. I think Scott Adams talked a lot about that. He was a big proponent of why Donald Trump was going to win, and he was very well proven right. And a lot of it just had to do with Donald Trump's ability to frame his opponent before he even got to their content. It was Lion Ted. It was, he couldn't have had a worse person to run against than Hillary Clinton. I don't know very many Republicans who are a fan of hers. I know some Democrats who are willing to, cover their nose and cast their vote for her, but I don't know too many people who absolutely think she's the best candidate for president.
Right.
She's corrupt as days long.
Yeah. So you own a farm, right? You own the farm, or?
I have a small farm in upstate New York with my wife, and we just have horses and a couple of cows, and we're just basically starting it off. I became a truck driver because I was a disgruntled farm employee. I had a college education, and I could never figure out how I was going to be able to make enough money working on a farm to actually go out, buy animals, and start doing my thing, which is what I ultimately wanted to do. And unfortunately, my college education didn't open enough opportunities where I could actually make that kind of money,
Yeah.
So I became a truck driver, and I've been doing it for over eight years now. And, I've got a wife, I've got a farm, we have animals at home, and my wife takes care of the farm and works on the side, and I go off on the road and try to make some money, and then I come home and work on projects and spend it all, and then go back on the road again.
Yeah. So being a business owner and a truck driver also, do you feel like the government is making it easier for you to succeed or harder for you to succeed? And to make it easier for you, would you want them to do more or get out of the way more from the experiences you've had so far?
Well, if you were to look at different industries that are federally regulated, trucking and food are two large, I would say, probably next to medical care, So I don't really have a lot of love for these rules that they impose on us, like the hours of service regulations that I have to follow how and drive.
Yeah.
I understand some of the motivations for coming up with some of these rules, but if I drive for 15 minutes, park my truck, and then sit for 8 hours, I have to wait until I get a full 10-hour break in to get the rest of my hours back until I could drive a full shift again.
Right.
Some of these scenarios that you come up with these archaic rules from don't have much basis in reality. But
Right.
it serves the purpose of limiting the amount of hours that a truck can make on a road, and in theory, it increases our level of safety. I don't know if it would, but people are still having accidents. Sometimes I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't have a lot.
Yeah, I hear you. I'm, as you know, I'm also a truck driver, and what I think is hilarious is in New Hampshire, where I'm from, they're going to require that you have to go to truck driving school to get your CDL now, and it costs like $10,000 to go to the school. And people are saying, well, the schooling now is making better drivers, but as you know, most drivers nowadays, they can't shift gears, they can't back up, they can't stay in between the lines. So it seems like the more and more regulation and the harder they make it to get a license, when people do get a license, they actually suck more because they're not getting the exposure. Like when I got my CDL, I worked at a lumber yard. And I was making minimum wage pretty much at the beginning, but then I just wanted to get my CDL. So I asked the boss if I could practice shifting the truck, driving it around the yard. And he was like, yeah, sure. And then I slowly gained skills, and then I decided to drive along with drivers, taking loads to different stores, taking them to job sites. And I learned, and I am a better driver than most people who are my age because I learned that way. It's this one size fits all approach that you're kind of talking about with the hours of service laws that we have to follow, because you can be an hour away from home and you have to stop for 10 hours to reset, like you're saying. And, that might look good on a piece of paper to some politician who wrote that rule, but what they think is every time an accident happens, instead of just realizing that people make mistakes, we need to legislate something so this can never happen again. And we're kind of seeing the fallacy of that thinking right now with COVID-19. Their idea is we have to do everything we can to keep anybody from dying. And you can't do that realistically, but that's how government thinks. With OSHA and with truck driving and with COVID-19, it's just legislate, ban, control, and that's somehow going to help people.
With COVID-19, they're spending all this time talking about trying to prevent the spread, but they're not talking anything about how to robustly build up your immune system, taking vitamins, they've cracked down on medical services so much that doctors are more drug salesmen than they are actually helping people.
Yeah.
Not helping, personally, I haven't been to a doctor since I was 25, and that was 15 years ago. I see a homeopath pretty regularly right now, and I've go to a chiropractor, and that's it.
Yeah.
But
so
here and my wife talking me going back into the system, but I don't know if I want to.
Yeah, I hear you. So do you think that we're actually, or I'll just say, I feel like we're making society worse. We're making people dumb because we have all these laws that make people unaware of their surroundings. So, I did line work for a while. You needed to wear a harness when you were 4 feet off the ground. I'm 6 feet tall and I've got a 5 foot long lanyard on. If I fall, I'm going to hit the ground still. It's going to keep me from rolling, I guess. But, like doing work on the power lines, it is dangerous and it's important to be safe, but they have so many things you have to do to protect yourself that are law, that they make you complacent because you feel like you're so protected. Where back in the day, people had to be more aware of what they were doing because there were dangers that were present. I don't know if you know Mike Rowe at all. I listen to him a lot, but he talks about that concept of safety third. because we're lying to ourselves if we say that our number one goal is safety, because it's not. Because if our number one goal was safety, none of us would work. We'd just stay home. Our number one goal is to make money and work. So safety has to fit in. But when we lie to ourselves that it's number one and that we can prevent all accidents from happening and that we can just have a bumpless society where we don't have to worry about any disruptions, we're just completely lying to ourselves.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And honestly, I went to one of those CDL driving schools, and going back to what you were talking about earlier, the teaching portion of the class, the teacher sat and read the book to us in order to get our hours for the teaching part of the class. So it's like, I could sit here and read the book myself, and as long as I'd pass those quizzes at the end, I would pass the class. But just kind of funny the way some of these turns of fate are written.
Yeah. So we've kind of gone from talking about presidential election to things in our own lives that we notice. So how do we further this message? Is it just through getting a president who thinks that way, or can we try to wake people up in our everyday lives to show them how stupid things have become? Is it at a local level? Is it all of the above? Like, what do we do to really illustrate to people how stupid things are getting and how we're headed in the wrong direction, and we need to relocalize ideas and re-individualize solutions, because everybody is different, every town is different, every state is different. How do we make that change? Because it doesn't seem like anyone is thinking that way. It seems like everyone in charge is just even Republicans are just thinking more regulations, more laws, more stupidity. And so what do we do, like, with aside from voting? How do we try to change that?
I've thought about running for office.
There you go.
More normal people should run for office and try to call these people out on some kind of a campaign, and try to, if you catch your guy doing something wrong, you should call him out on it and run against him and say, hey, this guy did X, Y, and Z, and we need better leadership in office. I have a feeling if I was to get into Congress, I would probably be another Dr. No, like Ron Paul was. I'd vote no, and these guys would come to me and have to beg me to try to vote yes, and I'd have to make them give me a really good reason why. Does it increase the federal budget? Can we actually pay for it? Or is it just a handout to a corporation? Because those are the people who are writing these laws anyway.
Yeah.
I think we just need to get people more involved and realize that we do own some part of the complacency that the government has been allowed to grow in. We do own a part of that, and we really need to be politically involved. It kind of goes against our anarchist and our libertarian roots to be trying to say, hey, it's not our right to impose our will upon X, Y, and Z, but maybe we need to. Maybe we really need to be politically active and say we need more of this and less of that.
Yeah, I mean, what kind of annoyed me was working where I've worked with a bunch of other blue collar guys is they don't care about politics. And once you start talking to them about it, they say, oh, they're all corrupt. I don't care. I don't want to know anything about it. And I understand where that comes from, but that's why we are where we are now, because the everyday American doesn't care, so they don't get involved. So I think it's important that people like you and me, who are regular Americans who deal with all this bull crap all the time, that we call it out and show people how stupid it is, because I feel like a lot of people who are politically involved are ones who go to college and work in a city, and that's fine, like that's part of America, but that seems like the entirety of the interest in politics is from that group of people. So I think we really need to get people like you and me who live out in the country and who work with our hands, who have skilled jobs. We need to get those people interested and concerned about what's going on, because they do complain. You know, when I was working, they would complain about all the stupid regulations. I'll use a quick example. We work in swamps, and the definition of a swamp has gotten ridiculous. It's something with a certain type of plant, so you have to do all sorts of permitting, and then you have to bring in all this extra stuff. You have to bring in these giant wooden mats to drive the machines over. So you have 10, 15 truckloads of those. You burn way more fuel. It costs way more money. It takes the job 3 times as long, and it ends up damaging the land more because of all the machines you have to bring in and out. And so they see the stupidity in it, but they don't do anything about it, because at the end of the day, they might vote for president because they're afraid, you know, the Democrat's going to take their AR-15 away or something. But that's about the the depth of the concern. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, you know, I think what the trouble is with, you know, just following the rules is, you know, you're taking your own control out of the situation because, well, I didn't write the rule. Right. I just followed the rule. You know, if we had a little more autonomy and a little more control over what we were actually supposed to be doing, you know, I understand having guidelines, things written down, but, you know, some common sense thinking can go a long way. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I guess we'll start wrapping it up here, but what are you hoping for this year? Like, are you interested in Jacob Hornberger, or do you just think we should not vote, or do you think we should just be focusing on 4 years from now, or what are your thoughts on that whole deal?
I mean, I'm going to be switching back to the Libertarian Party because, you know, there's been a great, you know, just this past gubernatorial election, Larry Sharp ran in New York State and managed to get 50,000 votes. So we finally have a line on the ballot, which was a difficult, you know, every state has different rules. So now that we finally have our party recognized on the state level, I think it's important to try to support the actual party that seems to be claiming to be libertarian and is for all the things that we're trying to promote. I know that in years past, 2008, 2012, there was a lot of resentment for the Ron Pauls of the world from the Libertarian Party because he would not switch parties to jump in and say, well, I'm a libertarian now and I'm the first libertarian congressman. Thank you, Justin Amash, for finally doing that. But, you know, yeah. I don't know if this is a top-down problem. I think it's a bottom-up solution, and we just got to find a way to support our way in and maybe become a bigger party. I don't know. It's hard to say, but I think we can't just put the blinders on and keep blaming our problems on somebody else. We got to take ownership of it and try to find a way to solve it, you know? Maybe that means running for treasurer. Maybe it means for running for city council, you know, or school board or something along those lines to try and, you know, beef up your chops so you know what's going on in the world, you know? They do a lot of stuff. You know, they say they do they hold public meetings and they try to do things in the open, but most of these deals are cut behind closed doors. You know that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And I think the Libertarian Party would be stupid to become an idealistic party that doesn't want to bring their philosophy to practical solutions. If they want to just stick to being, I'm going to drop his name. If they want to be a Jacob Hornberger party, they're not going to expand because he is not going to appeal to most Americans. We need to, embrace issues like climate change and the environment in general and helping poor people. We need to explain how we can approach those ideas from a libertarian perspective instead of writing them off and continuing that that image that we've had. But yeah, so hey guys, thanks for tuning in, and Mike, thanks for coming on, and we'll definitely have you back on. We're gonna try. I'm gonna be trying to do a lot of videos, and I'd like to have you on as much as you want to come on. And we'll continue these ideas. I'll just give you the last word.
Well, I just want to thank you for the time, and hopefully we'll do this again soon.
All right, man. Sounds good.
Yep. Thanks.
We'll catch you guys all later on the next video.